what happens when two young outcasts finally receive the attention that they desire from a popular boy, but everything goes wrong? Find out today on this episode of Teenage Murders with your host, Andreana. Let's start with the victim. 18-year-old Joseph Kelley. Kelley was a star football player about to enter into his final year at Mammoth Lakes Preparatory High School in Mammoth Lakes, a small mountain town in Northern California. Residents of Mammoth Lakes are mostly upper middle class or higher, and the town is reportedly one of the safest places in the state. A quiet town, no one in Mammoth Lakes locked their doors at night unless they knew trouble was coming for them. Joseph Kelley loved playing football. It was one of the few things he was good at and passionate about, and was well known for his escapades with the ladies. At the time of his murder, he was dating dancer Suzanne Warner from his school. The two were apparently the perfect match. Joseph was calm, where Suzanne was hot-headed, and he was calculated, where Suzanne was emotion-driven. However, the relationship may not have been very strong. Although the two approached their 2-year anniversary, it was common talk around the school that Joseph regularly got involved with other girls. Around the time of his murder, his new interest was a girl named Emily Suarez. Now, Emily Suarez was also a senior, or an incoming senior, at Mammoth Lakes Preparatory High School, and was a prominent member of the theater club. Although she was bright and bubbly, with long blonde hair, an outgoing personality, and a unique style that attracted attention from all of her classmates, she was quite withdrawn from social activity outside of theater, and had few friends besides Claire Rochester. Claire was 1 year younger than Emily, with curly brown hair, but the two were inseparable regardless. They preferred spending time at each other's houses to going to school or town events, and many rumors had it that the two were secretly in love with one another. Both of the girls came from upper middle class background and were never reported to have any instance of alarming social behavior. Now, here's what happened on the night of the crime. On July 16, 2019, at 1:23 a.m., 911 dispatchers in Mammoth Lakes receive an emergency call from a payphone outside of a gas station near the southern edge of town, revealing to them the presence of a dead body in the nearby woods. The caller was not identified, but had a forcibly low voice and a non-distinguishing American accent when he or she reported that the victim had apparently committed suicide. The same night, responders arrived to the area and find the body of a teenage boy, who they discovered to be Joseph Kelley through his wallet and identification, with a slit throat. In his hands, he held a butcher's knife. First responders contact Joseph Kelley's mother, who stated that she had been out of town that night on business, and Joseph had been left home with his older brother Jason, who was home from college for the summer. When asked, Jason stated that Joseph had actually left the house to visit his girlfriend Suzanne. However, Suzanne had been on a trip to Washington for a summer internship in preparation for her college's application in the upcoming fall. The officer searched through Joseph's phone, finding that his last call had been to an Emily Suarez around 11:48 p.m., and previous texts with her indicated that he had been on his way to her house before this. However, when the police visited the Suarez house to question Emily, the driveway was absent of any cars, but did have a very noticeable blood stain, and all the lights were on, but nobody answered the knocks on the door. Now let's discuss some of the evidence found at the scene of the body that we didn't mention before. Now really quickly, let's get some things clear on the classification of evidence. Now there's two main types of evidence. There's direct and then there's indirect evidence. Now a direct piece of evidence would be something like a confession that basically outright implicates a specific person in a crime, while indirect evidence is evidence such as things that you'd find at the scene of a crime that would imply connection to a certain suspect. Now, physical, chemical, and biological evidence are all different types of indirect evidence. As well, some types of evidence that we discuss are biological evidence, such as DNA, and this type of evidence can include different things such as blood, and it's basically evidence that could identify a certain suspect based on a specific biological profile. Now we also have chemical evidence, which includes glass and drugs, and these are any types of evidence that are basically analyzed for chemical composition, and it's not from a living source. We also have physical evidence, which would be physical items that you find at the crime scene, which can include tire marks, tool marks, fingerprints, fire burns, and different things like that. Knowing that, let's get into some of the evidence that we found at the scene of the body. Firstly, we have biological evidence in the form of DNA. There was DNA from skin cells and blood found underneath Joseph's fingernails, and it appeared that part of his nails had been broken off, likely from a self-defense struggle. The DNA was later tested once samples were collected from both Emily and Claire, and both of their DNA were found under his nails. We also have some chemical evidence in the form of glass. Tiny fragments of glass were found in the wound on the victim's throat, suggesting that the wound was created by a piece of glass that had been broken off. Physical evidence, such as weapons, impressions, and pattern analysis, as well as transient evidence, were found along the knife. The knife that the police found in the victim's hands did not have any fingerprints, and it smelled faintly of vinegar, suggesting that someone had tried to remove traces of evidence from it. However, the knife had blood smeared on it, but not at the sharp edges. Rather, the blood seemed to have been smeared on it after the murder. We also have pattern analysis and biological evidence. There was a trail of Kelley's smeared blood as if he had been dragged from the side door of the Suarez house and to their driveway, and a separate smear trail led from the forest entrance to the spot where the body was discovered. We also have a physical impression form of evidence, lipstick residue. Traces of cherry red lipstick were found on and around the victim's lips at the time of the discovery of his body. And lastly, we have chemical drug evidence. There was evidence of the common roofie drug in a Ziploc bag inside of Joseph's back pocket, while traces of the same substance, along with trace amounts of alcohol, were found in his system during the autopsy. Neither of the substances were found to be high enough in quantity to create a significant intoxication of the victim, given his size. It only took 2 days to track down the suspects Claire Rochester and Emily Suarez, who had taken the Suarez's family station wagon to attempt to flee south towards Mexico. The two were found outside of San Diego, having gotten pulled over for failure to stop at a stop sign. The officer who pulled the girls over noticed their unsettled demeanor. Neither of the girls could actually legally drive, so when Suarez pulled out her learning permit when asked for her license and registration, the police ran the plates on the car as well as Suarez's name, and immediately learned of their wanted status in Mammoth Lakes. They were taken in and brought back to their hometown, where they would be interrogated for 3 hours before Emily confessed, and Claire did the same soon after. Now for the timeline of the murder. It all started when Emily's parents went out of town for the week on an anniversary vacation to France. Emily and Claire decided to have a sleepover like they did many times that summer. Claire comes over to Emily's house around 7 p.m. that night, planning to have a night of watching scary movies and eating junk food until they eventually both pass out asleep on the living room. When she comes over, the two of them watch a newly released movie on the TV and order Chinese takeout. At around 9 p.m., the two grow bored of the movie and decided to do their makeup and take pictures together for their Instagram, as they oftentimes did. Claire, never one for makeup, opted to not put any on, while Emily Suarez did her makeup, complete with her signature red lipstick. According to the girls, the two take pictures for around an hour and a half, or maybe shorter, and Emily posts some of the photos onto her Instagram account, which Joseph Kelley follows. The two girls spent some time editing more photos to post later on Snapchat and Facebook when Emily receives a text from Joseph saying, "You up?" Emily, who was still excited from the novelty of her fling with Joseph, immediately responded. The two texted for a while. Eventually, the girls came up with the idea that Joseph should come over to hang out. Joseph arrives at the house shortly before 12 a.m. on the night of the 15th, and both girls were nervous for his arrival. Joseph brings a pack of 6 beers stolen from his brother and suggests that the girls should have some fun. Neither Emily nor Claire had ever tried alcohol and were against it, actually, but they figured they'd pretend to be interested and maybe take a sip or two. Emily goes to the bathroom quickly to make sure she looks presentable, and Claire follows her, while Joseph says that he's going to go to the kitchen to find a bottle opener. And here, according to Claire, is where the story gets a little bit difficult. Claire leaves Emily in the bathroom and wanders off to the kitchen, where she gets there just in time to see Joseph drop a white tablet into a bottle of beer and set it off to the side. Claire says that Joseph does not notice her and walks into the living room, setting the drugged bottle across from him for Emily to drink. Claire sits opposite, next to Emily's seat, quickly switching the two of their drinks, Claire and Emily's drinks, when Joseph isn't watching. Emily sits down. The three of them talk for a while, but Claire can't stop her heart from pounding. She couldn't believe a guy like Joseph would try to drug her friend, and she feels so angry that she could kill him. Emily offers to give Joseph a tour of the house, and he accepts, the both of them leaving their drinks on the table. Claire takes this opportunity to give Joseph her drug drink, switching his and hers. While on the tour, according to them, Emily and Joseph kissed a few moments in Emily's room, leaving Emily's lipstick all over Joseph's face, and when they return, Joseph seems uninterested in drinking anymore, so he only takes a few sips before he abandons the bottle. Claire panics and asks Emily to go to the bathroom with her. She fervently tries to explain to Emily what she caught Joseph doing, but Emily is reluctant to believe that Joseph would do something like that. After all, they had been talking every night on the phone for 2 weeks, was it? Claire continues begging Emily to make Joseph leave before something bad happens and to make up an excuse so he can just go, when she notices the shadow of feet outside the door. She realizes that Joseph has been listening the whole time. Joseph opens the door with a crazed look in his eyes, according to Claire, and approaches the two girls, leaning in close to Claire. He warns her that she has no idea what she's talking about and to, quote, shut up. Emily realizes then that Claire was right, and she pushes Joseph into the mirror hard, shattering the glass. He gets up, practically unharmed, and approaches the two girls, taking a pocket knife from out of his jeans and threatens to shut them up for good. Panicked, Claire knees him hard, and the knife dislodges from his hands. They struggle for multiple moments, during which Joseph scratched both girls while they all reach for the knife. However, Joseph drew his last breath in the moments when Emily, in a quick move, grabs a large shard of broken glass from the mirror and sneaks up from behind him, slitting his throat with all of the force she could muster. Joseph clutches his throat as he bleeds out, tumbling down to the floor. Emily and Claire are just left to stare in amazement. They quickly begin to panic, though, but they clean up the crime scene as best as they can. They drag Joseph from the side door of their house to the station wagon and try their best to get him into the back seat. They try to think quickly, so Claire grabs a butcher's knife from the kitchen and rubs some of the blood from Joseph's throat onto it. Before that, though, she does take the time to look up on Google how to get rid of fingerprints quickly and discovers that vinegar and water does the trick.